Lecture 5, Power, Influence, and Performance. This picture should look familiar to you. I used it in the lecture on communication. Okay, well, rarely will shouting matches erupt in the office environment, though they do, and I've seen them go down. Man, that's always ugly. But, okay, how about this? Maybe sometime after leaving an overtly civil conversation, laced with tension, office intrigue, turf battles, and maybe even a veiled threat, what plays out in your head might fit this picture pretty well. If you were to ask Susie and Calvin to evaluate each other's performance and how well they think each other were doing, how would they score each other? And this raises an interesting point because in this picture, as far as we know, neither is in charge, both are equal. As far as we know, both have sources of power. Each is trying to influence the other, and quite possibly both desire to achieve some level of performance in whatever they're screaming about. So let's take a look at some sources of power. Classically, there's three of them: referent, legitimate, and expert. I think a referent power is sort of a referral kind of thing. Well, I was talking to Hank the other day and he felt that. This means that someone has felt favor with you, what you said, and is willing to add their stamp of approval by aligning themselves with you. All right, now there's legitimate power, and it's pretty much a rank and pecking order sort of thing, and it's a fact of life in the workplace. Everyone works for someone. This is one of those that can really go to people's heads too, though, man. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, that sort of thing. It's the reason we started this course early on with a lecture on ethics. We'll touch on this one a bit more in the lecture on leadership. The bottom line here is this, that if wielded poorly, it's the sort of thing that slips into coercion, discontent, and eventually separation. Never forget, codependency aside, managers need their people more than their people need their managers. Hold this one over folks' heads, and eventually they'll walk. And finally, there's expert power. And this one branches in sort of beyond technical pencil neck geek sort of thing, right? We'll talk more about this a bit when we speak about management by walking around. The point in all this is that managers cannot rely solely on one of these sources of power for very long. You will eventually be found out.
Yeah, sure, that Pericles may be the director of research, but he has no clue about what's going on.
Ooh, that's ugly. The power of persuasion can be a useful tool. Recall that in Lecture 4 we introduced the Socratic method. Seek first to understand. And then we hit up Aristotle's ethos, pathos, and logos to be understood and to persuade. But that takes much effort, and the target person or group may simply not be interested in your persuasive powers, right? And sure, you might have some legitimate power as well, but like we uncovered about Pericles in the previous slide, you could be completely undermined because folks no longer respect you. However, there are often times, in fact the majority of time for middle managers, that amongst peers there is no pecking order. So persuasion built on expert and referent power is key. So do you see how these things are beginning to build, right? Chapter by chapter, lecture by lecture. We now really get a sense for just how tough managing organizational behavior can be. But there's hope. There's always hope. And while hope is not a plan, there is something called management by walking around. One of the best ways of helping your team be successful, or for helping you be prepared to come up and unleash a serious can of persuasion, you thought I was going to say something else, didn't you? Is to go to Gemba. Be that the plant floor, a supplier, an impromptu meeting, whatever. It's through something that's called management by walking around, and it gives you what the military calls situational awareness. Wikipedia defines management by walking around as a style of business management which involves managers wandering around in an unstructured manner through the workplace at random to check with employees or equipment. It's about the status of ongoing work, right? This definition, however, roils me quite a bit. It makes us managers seem a bit like Mr. Magoo. And if you don't know who Mr. Magoo is, it's time for a keyword search. Yes, you do wander the workplace, but it should be far from unstructured. In fact, it should be part of your daily or weekly standard work. Remember that homework assignment a week or so ago? If you keyword search that gold box there on the slide, you'll see what this is all about. The point is that scheduling your walk, yes, scheduling it, make sure that folks will come to expect you. And when they come to expect you, hopefully they'll be comfortable enough with you to engage you in a conversation. And then you in turn can be all Socratic and learn about what's going on. It's part of being there when people need you. Pitch in. Get your hands dirty. Eat your own dog food, that sort of thing. There are other things you can do as well, like arrive early to work. It goes along with the idea of grit we spoke about the first night of class. If it's important to you, then act like it's important to you. Same goes for meetings. Also, as I stated in the previous lecture, don't get yourself caught up in unimportant meetings. Make good choices. So during your management by walking around foray, you share a bit of yourself, but listen twice as much as you speak. As far as being authentic, as weird as this sounds, it comes with practice, especially for introverts like me. And as far as showing appreciation, simply listening intently shows appreciation. And when an Assembly 4 associate asks you for assistance regarding a job at hand, under-promise and then make sure you over-deliver. This goes for most of your interactions, but don't sandbag either. It's all a balance. What you're building is empathy with your team and your associates at work. This will begin to happen outside of work as well, and before you know it, you will have developed a brand new habit. Thank you, Stephen Covey. Go on to Gemba. To get the facts, you need to go to the real place and get the real facts. This requires your presence. It's what I and others call not giving quality time, but giving quantity time. It's you that must observe behavior over time. When things go well and you catch an employee doing well, let them know. Show them appreciation. Also, write it down in your journal. Remember that journal we talked about before? Or someplace else where you can accumulate such information. If you find something needing correction, let the employee know that too. And don't grandstand this, but make it clear. You have to decide if it's important enough for all to hear or troubling enough to have a private conversation. It's all about enforcing the standard and expectations, as well as being there for people. And dig deeper by asking for customer feedback. Remember that customers are the next person in line downstream from your employee. Customers receive what you or any of us created or touched last. With all of this, write it down. Not everything, but stuff that seems noteworthy. Come review time, it helps. And here's a thought. What if you consider your employee as if they were your customer? Would they buy from you again? As with all of this, setting clear goals and expectations is key. Remember chapter 1, we reviewed the idea of SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound. But this is only half of the equation. The last slide began to touch on behaviors, observed behavior over time, and on results, clear goals and expectations. So if we were sitting in the class, I'd ask us to compare and contrast these two statements. First statement, it's results and not effort. Second statement, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. We've both heard these before, right? And of course, these two statements are not mutually exclusive, but they do have an interesting interplay. So recall American history and Sherman's March to the Sea. Result? It essentially ended the Civil War. How? By using total war. Now, I'm not equating total war with the business environment, though some do. For the vast majority of us, though, scorched earth is not a viable option. But some associates and employees are willing to carry things this far in a figurative sense because they feel it is in the best interest of the company. And if driven too far, we could end up in unethical no man's land, or worse. So how do you calibrate your team to balance behavior and results? Our authors offer a diagram on page 249, figure 7.2. It's called the Results Behavior Matrix. So go ahead and turn to page 249 and take a look at figure 7.2. As you refer to your books on page 249, take a moment to look at the 9 box here presented. The x-axis is all about results, and the y-axis is all about behavior. Okay, so the employees here are named quite cleverly A through H, and all appear somewhere in the box. This is a pretty typical result. you will find employees that deliver results in a steady, according to plan sort of way, right? And these are the folks you'll find in box 4, the center. There are often folks that go above and beyond the call in terms of results, always pushing the boundary and always going the extra mile. These folks you'll find in the box 5R, and they will most likely become subject matter experts. It's pretty obvious, too, that there will be high potential folks, and they're in the upper right-hand corner, that not only exhibit the best behaviors aligned with the company mission and vision and values, but also deliver above and beyond the call. They come to work with the best attitudes and are infectious with their energy. They're the folks that are next in line for your job. We'll touch on that more in Chapter 12. Sometimes there will be folks that are struggling to deliver, and they'll have a general work attitude or behavior that, well, kind of sucks. Apart from a lack of results, there is a failure to do what the book calls organizational citizenship. You will have to make a call if it's correct to invest in them or to release them. It's the worst part of the job of management, but when using tools like the 9-box, the activity becomes less like sitting in judgment of someone and more like keeping score. And they simply did not make the score. Okay, now I know this chart is impossible to read, and you really don't need to be able to read it to know the specifics here. All right. In general, and with that inset there as a guide, you can see that there are a number of expectations and goals required of an employee. Each category or competency is judged to be either a leadership or results category. So we'll say leadership is behavior and results is, well, results. Employees are provided this matrix each year, and the matrix is tied to the company's mission, vision, and values. In this way, a complete evaluation of an employee against clear goals and expectations across both behaviors and results is made clear, and it's agreed upon right up front. So, a couple of examples here, right? Let's go to PE3. There it is, delivering on KPIs. It's clearly a results expectation tied to a goal. A KPI is a key performance indicator. Result, right? There's something going on the company needs to measure, and you're responsible to deliver on it. How about we look over at PE5 there, PE5. Okay, there. Serving internal and external customers with respect. It's judged to be a leadership expectation or a behavior, and it can be verified by you, the manager, going to Gemba with the management by walking around Discovery. You can have a conversation with an internal or an external customer regarding this. So now think about your own company and the evaluation system that's used there. Wouldn't it be great to know where you stand? And even better, to be able to clearly let those that follow you know where they stand too? Now, a few additional important points here. So the entire matrix showing all the results and all the employees, the entire 9-box with all the names, you do not show that to your team. You do not share that with the team. You just don't do that, right? But you can show individuals their individual results in their individual 9-box because they're going to want to know where they landed, right? Now, if you're defending a bonus or a raise or a separation or something like that, then yeah, you're going to share the entire matrix with management or HR to justify your decision. And I know this seems like a lot of work, right? And it sort of is set it all up like this. But once it's set up, it is super easy to use, can be updated during the year, and used at any time with any employee. Okay, one more management slide here, folks. It's called Managing Your Boss. What I can say here is this. I really appreciate this of my employees, and I try to practice this with my boss. The question is that of facilitation, and it goes both ways. As a boss, how might you facilitate your employees' ability to comprehend point 1? The first thing I do is hand out my job description. Hopefully you work for a company that uses these. In this way, they know what the company expects of me. As far as discovering my strengths and weaknesses, well, we'll talk a bit more about that in the lecture on leadership, but this is one of those quantity time things. The more time they spend with me, the more they will get to know me. As for number 2, self-reflection and assessment can be tough. I know that personally, I bristle at the thought of being dependent upon an authority figure. It's just not something I cotton to too well. It doesn't mean I'm incapable of taking direction. In fact, it's quite the opposite. I just know that for me it's important at times to disconnect the message from the messenger. And truthfully, that ain't always easy to do for me. With respect for number 3, again, this takes time. One way I approach this is that whenever I approach my boss for a decision, I try to come away with both a decision that I have helped frame such that he and she doesn't need to play 20 questions, and also set up policy so that in the future I can be self-sufficient. Well-written and communicated command intent can go a long way here. But if your boss isn't familiar with command intent, do not force this down his or her throat. Simply seek a form of command intent with a decision/policy conversation, and then make a note of it. Really make a note of it. Afterward, maybe share it with him or her in the form of an email, just to make sure you're both clear on the same page, that the decision was made based on these things, and from here on out, we'll make it the same way moving forward. Command intent. All right, let's get on to some of our call to action items. All right, Lecture 5, Call to Action. The classic sources of power, referent, legitimate, and expert power, must often be backed up or supported by the power of persuasion. Management by walking around is key in giving you situational awareness, keeping you connected and informed, and it gives you the ability to enforce the standard. Likewise, management by walking around affords you the opportunity to simply be present and be there for your team. Avoid scorched earth and counsel your team similarly. In most companies, what you accomplish is just as important as how you accomplish it. And finally, it's all about quantity time, not quality time. Sorry to break the news to you, it's just the way it is. Welcome to management.